Hello, I'm Soycat and welcome back to our second channel geography video. So I'm sure I'm not the only one right now who really wishes they could travel to so many of the world famous cities. One example would definitely be Moscow, right? There's so many things I'd love to see in Moscow, but here's the deal about Moscow. Fun fact, most people actually mislocate it on a map. Most people would assume it's all the way on the east of Europe, but actually it's found right here in Tennessee. That's right, near Memphis, Tennessee. You can see there is a city called Moscow, Tennessee, and even if we ignore the fact that it's next to a small unincorporated town called 45, and it's next to a town called Yum Yum as well, you can see how Moscow, Tennessee actually has not only a Brad's Barbecue, not only a Highway 70 car care, but also a Dollar General. This is a really high quality town that obviously is actually named after a Cherokee chief. It's named Moscow, so it's a little bit misleading for me to say this is the real Moscow, because the real Moscow, we all know where it really is. It's found, we know it. It's found in Idaho to the west of the United States, so you just have to go past Amsterdam. Weed is, of course, legal here, and many other things. They've got those little townhouses, but if we go past Amsterdam, what you'll find is all the way to the north of the state, there is a, there is a city called Moscow, and this city is actually quite important in the Idaho, landscape, because the University of Idaho is actually found here as well. So, just to be more serious here, this Moscow, as opposed to the other one, isn't named after the natives necessarily, but is most likely to have been named after some Russian immigrants, etc. So, you know what, it was misleading me to say this is Moscow. We all know where the real Moscow is, right? And we also all know where the real Paris is, surely. I mean, Paris is a pretty famous city around the world. I mean, that Eiffel Tower thing that it has, that's a real big deal. Well, let me show you Paris, because Paris does in fact have an Eiffel Tower, and even though we can't visit it right now, what we can do is we can look at it from Google Maps. This is Paris, Texas, of course, and that is the world famous Eiffel Tower with it has a cowboy hat on it. That is perfect. You know what? I love it. So yeah, obviously in the movies they make it look bigger, but this is the Eiffel Tower. They built one in Paris, Texas, and here's the cool thing about Paris, Texas, right? If you want to go from Paris to another famous city, you might think to yourself, oh yeah, Toycat, you're from London, right? How do I get there? Well, if you want to get from Paris to London, all you have to do is type it in just like this, and yeah, as you can see, it's a 362-mile drive, or about 5 hours and 47 minutes, which actually, just as a fun little fact, because London and Paris, they're famous cities, you'd like to see both of them on the same day. Fun fact, it's actually faster to get between, actually both distance-wise and time-wise. You can see that the distance between Paris and London by driving is 360 miles, whereas the distance between, Paris and London on a real map in kilometers, which are, again, like 2.5 kilometers to 1.5 miles, is about 330, as you can see right there. So, fun fact, also, a little bit more, 340, which means that you can get between Paris and London in Europe faster than you can get between Paris and London, not just in the US, but within Texas alone. That is how big Texas is. I just want that to be on the record here. But let's stop talking about silly alternate place names. Let's talk about, everyone's favorite, big city around the world. It's kind of famous because, fun fact, Berlin is a really big city. Obviously, there's a lot of German speaking people there. But the thing you might know about Berlin that makes it kind of famous is the fact that, oh yeah, Berlin is divided into east and west, right? And obviously, this map is misleading. This isn't what Berlin looks like at all. But fun fact, did you know Berlin actually is divided into east and west? There is an East Berlin and there is a West Berlin. I can't find the history on whether the East-West division is whether that came before, whether the division of Berlin into East and West was before it happened in Europe, but I love that there genuinely is an East Berlin and a West Berlin in Berlin, New Jersey, because Berlin, New Jersey, really famous place. I actually have been here myself. This is the one on the list I have been to, not because there was I want to be fun, although I realized it was fun. I went here, I think, because they had the nearest Wawa to where I was staying, and also the nearest Walmart. So this Walmart right here, because again, you might say there are no Walmarts in Europe, but Walmart Berlin proves you wrong, because yeah, I've been inside this precise Walmart. There was a guy at the door, doing something with charity, so we went in a different entrance, and then walked through the store, and I bought some drugs there that are legal in America but not legal in the UK. Don't worry, just for sleeping, because melatonin is really not recommended to take off prescription in most countries around the world. In America, you can buy it in a bottle for $6. But let's talk about things you can also buy in a bottle for $6. Don't know how that links to what we're saying next. You know what? London. You could put London in a bottle, right? So London is a city, I've shown you London, Texas, right? But London is a city that's found all over the east of the United States. I mean, it's no real shock. I've mentioned before, hey, did you know one of the big cities in Connecticut, I think it is actually called New London? Wow, that's kind of shocking. There's also, you know, it's somewhere around here. I know it's one of the train stops on the. There we go. Here's New London. It's actually a pretty big city in the Connecticut landscape. Is it Connecticut? It is Connecticut. So wow, look, New London. But you know what's better than London? Oh, by the way, their airport is just over there. But you know what's better than that? The fact that genuinely in real life this has happened to me. I was speaking to someone in Canada, and they're like, "Where are you from?" They're like, "London." You know, I said London. They're like, "Oh, me too." And they meant the London in Canada, and they didn't seem to have any layer of like, "Haha, that's funny." But yeah, London is a pretty important city. Everyone knows a little bit about it, right? What you might know about London is that it's on the River Thames, right? And obviously, London has proven that that is correct. This is the Thames River. Why? Why did they name... Like, I do wonder, like, why exactly do they do these things? Why exactly was this idea their idea? I don't know, but it was. And yeah, you can do a lot of things that you can do in London right here. Like go to the real Canadian superstore, or, you know, you can go to Covent Garden Market. Really? Yeah, if you don't know, I'm assuming this is a niche fun fact, but like Covent Garden is like a pretty central area of London. And this looks surprisingly similar, like besides the fact that it's all indoors. But yeah, Covent Garden Market, London, Ontario. But ignore the Ontario bit. And you can have yourself a real British experience. Look at that. This is exactly what it's like to stay in London. We have Canadian and American flags flying everywhere in our capital. We probably do actually have a surprising number of those. But yeah, so when obviously place names, they'd be silly. Pretty much every major European capital you can find somewhere in the United States. But there's a few exceptions to that. So there's no Istanbul, United States, because there aren't a huge number of Turkish immigrants, or weren't during the formation. And if you try to find like a smaller niche capital with very few immigrants, so for instance, I looked into, you know, if you don't know, capital of Bulgaria is Sofia. It's a city I've been to. I like it a lot. I was like, you know, is there a Sofia in the United States? And the closest thing I could find is that there's a Sofia, New Mexico. But as, you know, again, I can't find any information after the 1920s. And also I learned a fun fact that it was made by Bulgarians. Which, you know, they named after their capital. Kind of a fun little thing. But also, the Bulgarians, after, you know, after World War I, they decided to sell their American land and return to Bulgaria. So that's a story you don't hear very often, and that's why I guess Bulgaria, Sofia, New Mexico is not so important, and indeed you can't really even find it so easily on maps. But what you can find easily on maps, because again, I just want to mention pretty much every European city you're going to find somewhere here. But what's shocking to me is the fact that if we go to New Hampshire, one of the major cities in the election cycle for the United States of America is Manchester, New Hampshire, because New Hampshire is the second state in the primaries over there. So the biggest city in the second state, so one you need for momentum, is Manchester. Manchester is the biggest city in New Hampshire, which is maybe interesting by itself. But more interesting is the fact that, like, near Manchester, which again is the UK's second biggest city, sometimes the third, near Manchester, you can see how they've solved the Londonderry dairy dispute, because again, just as a fun fact, in the UK, United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, there is a city that is so controversial that Google just uses both names. It's called Londonderry by some people. It's called Derry by others. You can get in trouble for saying the wrong name, and people regularly do. But the solution here is just to have Londonderry over here and Derry over there. Again, just like dividing Berlin into two, they've really nailed this one, in my opinion. And yeah, we could go on forever and just be like, hey, did you know that also the second largest city in Alabama is Birmingham? Again, the second biggest city, or sometimes the third in the UK. Did you know that in Georgia, which already is named the same as a European country, although it has more people than Georgia, Europe, so arguably Georgia is the real poser state right there. But yeah, Georgia, fun fact, they're both named after, they're both named after the patron saint King George, no, St. George indirectly. King George is named after St. George, and Georgia is named after King George. Georgia is just directly named after the same dude. So fun fact, same named origin. But in Georgia, which is already a European country, there's a city called Athens, you know, that's the capital of Greece, and there's a city named Rome, and if I'm not mistaken, you can fly between Rome and Athens, or I don't think you fly between them, but you can fly from both cities. They both have some form of airport. So yeah, Rome and Athens, if you want to go between them, don't bother going all the way to Europe, just go to Georgia. That's what I recommend. There's a lot of funny place names in Georgia, but those are both like pretty major settlements, as you can see. We're not talking about small town Moscow, you know, Tennessee anymore. We're talking about big ones. But yeah, before we kind of leave this to the side, because obviously there are so many crazy examples of like, oh yeah, this is a wacky thing. Because the truth is, America is a big continent that had to come up with place names. And how do you come up with a place name when you don't have like, you know, if you're an immigrant and you're like, oh, I want to name something, you think of what's familiar to you. That's why so many place names get duplicated. That's why so many place names are just straight from Europe. And that's why, for instance, if you look at the number of Springfields in the United States of America, you can see how it's like a ludicrous number. It's not because they're lazy at naming, although actually it's totally because of that too. But it's because they're like, oh yeah, we'll name it as Springfield. And, you know, like, basically, there's lots of places with the same names in America, and it's pretty much inevitable. But rather than ending on that note and making fun of America again, which I could do all day, you know. Also, wait, actually, you know, just for fun here, let's go ahead and let's show you the fact that, did you know there is a town called America here in, wait, we went to the wrong place. But did you know there is a town in the Netherlands? There we go, America, Netherlands. I tried to type NL. Did you know there is a town in the Netherlands called America? Which means you might think that, you know, for instance, you know, universal healthcare would never come to America, but guess where it already has come to? That's right, America. I think they actually use a weird mix of like public healthcare and insurance-based. Most European countries do. Fun fact. But anyway, yeah, it's in Limburg, which is my favorite place in the world. But you know what else is my favorite place in the world? London, the real city. Yeah, we're talking about my favorite city today. But you might think, oh yeah, London, pretty famous for its bridges, right? I mean, Tower Bridge and London Bridge, they're both next to each other. Tower Bridge is temporarily closed. I guess you can't visit the attraction side of it. They can't close the bridge though, right? Or maybe they can. But anyway, so this is Tower Bridge. It's a pretty important bridge. Everyone has seen it somewhere. If I show you on a boat, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's what I assume is London Bridge. A lot of people do. It's a really nice bridge. I like it. It's one of the first these types of bridges in the world. I don't know the term, okay? But London Bridge is another bridge that's just as famous, because London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down, and something else about this rhyme. Anyway, so this is London Bridge now. It's actually a pretty ugly bridge, in my opinion, like, but it's famous because a lot of people mistake it for the more pretty Tower Bridge. Also, we had some terror attacks there recently, so pretty good bridge. You might be saying, Toycat, how does this relate to Bad Names video? You're just rambling on again, and it actually does, because if you look, it says 1970s bridge spanning the River Thames. You might question, hasn't London Bridge been around a lot longer than the 1970s? And yes, actually, it has. So what happened to the old London Bridge? What happened to the one that was there before? And you won't believe this, but you know, actually, I'm going to say, trust me on this, because I know you're not going to, but this is a good example of something you should look up. Go over to Lake Havasu City in, Arizona, and you'll find London Bridge. And this London Bridge, you assume like, haha, it's funny, they've just named it after London because, you know, is this the Thames again? It's not, by the way, but like, haha, they sure are kind of silly that way. They've made London Bridge Road. But no, this right here, this London Bridge in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, is the original London Bridge. You know, we're like, so it's modeled after it? Wow, they did a really good job modeling this. No, they took... I don't also... Like, this is the dumbest thing. When they were trying to build a new London Bridge, like, for some reason they decided to, like, look for buyers. They found an eccentric, rich American buyer who was willing to take apart the entire, London Bridge brick by brick, mail it to America. Well, I had to go to California, then overland from there to here, and then reassemble it brick by brick so that they effectively bought the bridge and moved it over here to Arizona. Sounds so absurd that even when you look, even if I show you a source, you'd be like, no, that source has to be fake. But look into this story, it very much is real. London Bridge was bought and sold and moved across a river right over here, which is why it partially doesn't line up with the length of the river at all. But also, it's just the most absurd thing. But this is the very real London Bridge made by the real City of London. That is a real crest, not a replica. And that just blew my mind too much, that it just made me realize, you know what? Where can this video go? That is, we have reached peak American things being named after British things. Like, this is very clear in an American town. They've got Safeway, they've got In-N-Out, they've got a Walgreens, a Kmart, a Panda Express, all my favorite things in the world. But also, they have the real London Bridge. And I really want to visit just for that reason. I just don't believe it. No matter how many times I show you, you're going to be like, well, famous bridge rebuilt off being transported from London in the 1970s. Well, Google Maps can be bought and sold, right? Who trusts that one? And it's just like, it just broke me. And maybe this breaks you too. Yeah, Americans are not only good at naming things after the UK and indeed Europe, but they're also very good at literally buying things that you don't think can be bought and moving there anyway. And I like that but also I find it shocking. Maybe you do too. Maybe it's just a big deal for me because I live in London. But either way, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, you can like it and let me know. And I'm just kidding, it's the second channel. I do care about you, but I'm going to say goodbye.